So we are in our fifth and final class of kindness and commitment, a journey through the book of Ruth. Shavuos is next week. We will be reading, God willing, from the book of Ruth of Megillas Rus, and we will be ready because we will have learned through the entire thing, hopefully by then. We have one more chapter to go. We're ready to start chapter 4. So just to get our bearings where we're holding here, so Ruth has approached Boaz in the field in the middle of the night and requested that he be her redeemer, that he redeem her field, that he marry her, maybe a sort of yibum. And Boaz has said he would love to, but there is another family member who would have first rights to that role, and that is someone who we're about to meet. But we know from Chazal his name was Tov. He was Elimelech's brother, Boaz's uncle. Boaz was Elimelech's nephew, and so this person Tov is more closely related to Elimelech and to Machlon and Kilion, and therefore would be first in line to redeem. Robert, question already. What did I say?
I don't want to push ourselves into a long discussion, but the whole quasi Yibum redemption thing seems peculiar to me, and in two ways. Aside from the fact that it's different from actual Yibum, the first is that why is there a connection between marriage and redeeming the land? And the Torah talks about redeeming land that's been sold, but there's never any discussion that you have to marry somebody in order to do it. You can just buy the land back. And also, why there's no notion of precedence. I mean, there is a notion that with actual Yibum, there's a notion that the eldest brother is the proper person to do it. But if somebody else does it, it's fine. It's not like if one of the other brothers decides to do Yibum, he has to get the elder brother to say no to say he won't do it first. And if he goes ahead and does it without checking with the elder brother, it's a valid Yibum. So I'm not sure where either of those notions come from.
Okay, I hear. Good question. So let me get to them in 1 second. Just 1 second. I have to pause for 1 second. I'll be right back.
Apparently, I drove him away.
Amazing if this is the first time.
Let's see. There we go.
Okay, so fine. So in terms of those questions, so it's true. It's not a real Yibum, and there's usually no connection between redeeming fields and Yibum and those things. So let's just I guess review a couple of points from last time. So the first thing is that the whole idea of redeeming the field here, the Ramban says, was sort of similar to the idea that the whole concept of redeeming field, redeeming land, is to try to keep land within a given family or within a given shevet, within a given tribe. And if a person fell on hard times and would need to sell their land, so the ideal would be that the closest family members would be the ones to redeem it, would be the ones to buy it so that it remains within the family. And the Ramban says that the next inheritor would be the first one to have the right sort of to buy that land. And the way he says it is like it sounds like it's not Torah law. It maybe was custom of the time that that's who would have that first right. So like we talked about, we brought up the concept of Dina de Bar Matzra, the neighboring fields. You know, that was in a different time. The whoever had a neighboring field, a connected field, an adjacent field might have the first rights to the field. But in this time, at least in this type of situation, where and that might be in a normal sale where somebody just wants to sell their land. But if somebody's selling their land because they have fallen on hard times, so we want to ideally keep it within the family, and we would give first rights to the closest of next of kin, the closest inheritor. That being said, it seems that over here, Ruth herself put a condition on it, which was that whoever redeems the field also has to marry me. And that was her call. It's her field. She could at the end of the day sell it to whoever she wants. And so the ideal is to sell it to a family member. But she also wanted to make sure that she would be taken care of. And she wanted to, in the spirit of Yibum, to perpetuate the memory or the soul of the departed. And so she wanted somebody to marry her. And she knew that that giving the person the right to the land would also be helpful, and that potentially be helpful in getting somebody to marry her. So those two things came together. Okay, so let's pick up chapter 4, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. So Boaz has said to Ruth, I'd like to marry you, but there's somebody first in line. So the Pasuk says, Boaz Allah Hashar. Boaz went up to the gate. The shar, the gate, is usually where the court sits. Vayeshev Shama, he sat there, right? Which implies already that Boaz was a prominent person. I think we mentioned before, he himself was the Av Basting. He was the head of the court. We can see that from this verse where he goes up to the shar, the gate, which is where the court sat, and he sits there. Vinei hagoel over. And behold, the Goel, that redeemer, that next of kin, was passing. Asher diber Boaz, the one who Boaz had spoken of. Vayomer, and he said, Boaz said, Surah, turn aside, to come here, basically. Shva po, sit here, Ploni Almoni. Vayasar Vayeshev. And indeed he came and he sat. And the verse refers to him as Ploni Almoni, which is definitely not his name, but how it's being referred to him. So let's just break down what's going on in this verse. So first of all, Boaz goes up there and he's planning to summon this person anyways. His name was Tov, this uncle of his. He's planning to summon him to ask him if he wants to redeem the field of Ruth and to marry Ruth. And he was planning to go to the court, arrange for a messenger to go summon him, subpoena him to the court. And that was his plan. Now it happened to be, just so happened, Hashem arranged that he would actually just pass by, and he wouldn't have to summon him, and things would move quicker. And that's the Hine, as we mentioned last week. Hine is like, behold, it wasn't expected, but all of a sudden he just so happened to be passing by, because God had arranged for events to play out that way. And it's Asher Diber Boaz. It's this Goel about whom he had spoken about, so God arranged for him. Some commentaries say that he had davened that things should work out. Asher Diber Boaz, that he had davened, he had prayed that things should fall into place. And behold, all of a sudden, everything's falling into place because this Goel, who they need, is right there when they need him. And he says, please come aside. He wasn't planning to. This man wasn't going. He wasn't walking by because he was planning to go to the court. He just happened to be passing by. So he says, "Come and stay here." Now it calls him Ploni Almoni. Ploni is a word that we often have in the Gemara to mean like John Doe, like the no name. And the commentary say it relates to the word Pele, which is a word for like hidden. So the Navi, the Megillah here is hiding his name, and Almoni also could have that connotation. Of Rashi says he's without a name. The Targum, the Aramaic translation here, calls him Gevar Ditzanin or Chose. Why is he called? What's hidden about him? Not just his name, but he was a person whose ways were hidden. His activities were hidden, which implies, says the Mitzvah, that perhaps he's somebody who kind of keeps to himself, doesn't get involved in the affairs of other people, which sometimes could be good, but in a lot of situations not good. He's kind of like, I take care of myself, and I look after my own needs, and I don't look after the needs of others. And that is somewhat what we will see from his choices here, that he's really most interested in himself and not as interested in the needs of others. So Boaz, verse 2 continues, Vayikach 10 anashim. He took 10 men, miziknei ha'ir, from the elders of the city, Vayomer, and he said, Shvu po, please sit here, Vayeshevu, and they sat. So he gathers 10 men. He wants 10 men present. What are the 10 men there? So we mentioned last week that there's a whole backdrop to the whole story here, which is it permitted to marry Ruth in the first place? Because the Torah says, Lo yavo Ammoni Moavi bikal Hashem, that an Ammonite and a Moabite is not allowed to enter the congregation. They're allowed to convert, but they can't marry a born Jew. So specifically converts from Moab and Ammon. And Ruth was a convert from Moab. So is she allowed to marry? So this was a big question being debated. And Boaz had a tradition and ruled that it is permitted. Now, but a judge is not allowed to rule on something that's nogea to him, that affects him. So if he's the one who's able to choose to marry her, then it would be somewhat biased for him to make that ruling right now. And he's the one who wants to marry her. So he specifically wants the ruling to be made when it's really nothing to do with him, because there's somebody else who's supposed to marry her right now. It's not me. So he gathers 10 men to finalize that ruling, and at this specific time, before he finds out if Tov is going to actually marry her or not, because he wants to do it before it becomes relevant and related more to him. So he gathers the 10 men and they make that ruling. That's what our sages teach us. And then he says to the Goel, Vayomer Goel, he said to the Goel, to this man, the portion of the field that belonged to our brother Elimelech, Naomi sold, or some understand wants to sell. Naomi Ashava Mistei Moav, Naomi who's returned. So Naomi had a portion of the lands of Elimelech because she was his husband. She was his wife, and when Elimelech died, she got a ksuba. She received a portion of his land as alimony, or as a ksuba. So she owns part of Elimelech's land, and Ruth also owns part of the lands because Ruth got it from her ksuba from her husband, Machlon. So she now wants to sell it, and Boaz continues and he says, "Vani amarti," and I said, "Egle aznacha leim," where I'm going to let you know, Mr. Uncle Tov, kinei neged hayoshvim v'neged ziknei ami. You should acquire. You have your chance to acquire here in front of all those seated here and in front of the elders. Im tigal ge'al, if you're going to redeem. Vim lo yigal, and if he will not redeem, hagidali, tell me, ve'edan, I will know, ki ein zuvasta legal. There's nobody else besides you who should be the one to redeem the land. Va'anochi acharecha, I am next, and I'll do it. Vayomer, so the man said, Anochi agal, I'll redeem the field. I'd like to do that. I'd like to redeem the field. The commentaries point out that if you pay close attention, he says, if you will redeem, and if he will not redeem, tell me. He switches to third person, and so the Akedas Yitzchak says that that it was Ruach HaKodesh, that he was saying, he was predicting he will not redeem, and we had this moment of divine inspiration. He said he will not redeem, meaning he was predicting what would happen. The Igar Shmuel says otherwise. He says that he didn't want to say this in second person, if you will not redeem, because that was a bad thing. So it was like, he didn't want to say it about him if the one who's supposed to won't do it. So when he says if you'll redeem, that's the right thing to do. And if he won't, meaning if the one who's supposed to won't, but I'm not going to say it about you, then I'll do it instead. So So he gives him the option, and at this point, he doesn't mention anything about Naomi yet. He's first saying about Rus. He's only talking about Naomi's field, and that's all he mentions so far. And that's also, it says in verse 3, Gimel, a portion of the field, because it's only a portion of the lands that are available, but there's also the portions of Rus that it seems it was a package deal. You have to, so at first he says, will you want to redeem Naomi's fields? And the guy says, yes. And then he says, and then in verse 5, Vayomer Boaz, and Boaz said, B'yom kanosva sadam ya Naomi, on the day that you acquire the field from Naomi. Oh, and also me'es Rus hamoavia, eshes hames, and also at the same time you're going to have to redeem the field of Rus, and also kanisa, you'll have to acquire her as a wife. You have to take her as a wife. L'hakim shem hames anachal, so to establish, to perpetuate the name of the departed, the name of her husband, because that is part of this deal. So now he's saying, actually, there's a little bit more to this agreement than I first let on, and he's saying, in order to redeem the fields of Naomi, you also have to redeem the field of Rus. But in order to redeem the field of Rus, it's a package deal. You're going to have to marry her to do this Yibum type of act, to in the spirit of Yibum, to perpetuate the name of the one who has departed. Again, there's different, as we mentioned last week, the Malbim is more focused on the concept of Yibum. Others say, no, you're perpetuating the name by purchasing the land of the departed and marrying his wife. And when the wife goes in and out of the field, people say, oh, that's the field that used to belong to Machlon, and that's a way of perpetuating the name of the departed. Other commentaries don't talk as much about Yibum as the Malbim, but he's pretty focused on it. So that's the deal, is you have to also, in order to redeem anything here, in order to acquire the fields, you're going to have to marry Rus and do this Yibum. Now he refers to her as Rus HaMoaviyah, right? The Rus, the Moabite. And Yigar Shmuel says that actually Boaz was trying to plant in the mind of his uncle, of Tov, that she's a Moabite. You might not want to do this, right? Because really Rus wanted to marry, Boaz wanted to marry her. He wanted to fulfill this mitzvah. He wanted to be the one. And he was specifically kind of leading the Tov down the path of not being interested, by saying, oh, she's a Moabite, and that would plant things in his mind that maybe he wouldn't want to do that. And the Yigar Shmuel says that that's okay when it comes to a mitzvah. If it's not yet somebody's mitzvah, if they don't have it yet, if they haven't, I guess they're not holding it, they haven't taken responsibility for it yet, then you can try to grab it instead from them. And that's what he was doing here. A very interesting thing. The commentaries actually bring this in the context of halacha, the Shari Tshuva and the laws of Pesach. I saw this quoted. What if there's only one portion of matzah available? It's ownerless. It's hefker. A kazayas of matzah on Pesach, and it's hefker. It's ownerless. So should you say to your friend, you can have it, and you do the mitzvah, or should you say should you say I want the mitzvah? There's only one. I'm gonna take it. Again, you're not taking his matzah or her matzah. It's nobody's yet. So he wants to prove from here, one of his proofs, that you're allowed to grab it, because Boaz was trying to, not only he was trying to grab the mitzvah here, he was even trying to lead, which is interesting because here it's almost like it was somebody else's mitzvah that he's taking, but he doesn't view it that way. He views it as it's still nobody's mitzvah yet. The other guy has the right to decide first to take it, but he hasn't yet taken it. So Boaz has the right to lead him down the path of not being interested, and so that Boaz can get the mitzvah for himself. And indeed, in Pasuk Vav, in verse 6, it says, Vayomer HaGoel, and the Goel said, this man said, Lo uchal ligo, I'm not able to redeem it. Why? Lest I destroy my inheritance, my offspring. Ge'al lecha, you do it, you be the one to redeem. I can't be the one to do it. And so one of the commentators, Yosef Karo, says that he was just really making excuses. He didn't once he didn't want to marry Ruth, either simply because she was from Moab, or on the halachic grounds that he thought it wasn't halachically acceptable. And so he said, I can't because I'm going to ruin my portion. What did he mean by that? So according to Rabbi Yosef Karo, he meant, I don't have any money to redeem the field. I'm going to have to sell my own portion to be able to have the money to redeem this portion. I don't want to get rid of my own portion to get this portion. And but he says it was just an excuse. That's what Rabbi Yosef Karo says. But Rashi says that I'm concerned about my offspring because of the prohibition to marry a Moabite convert. And since the Torah says Moabite is not allowed to enter the congregation of Yisrael, so I don't want to marry her. And he didn't hold, or he erred in terms of this halacha that really it's permitted since she is a Moavite, and not a Moavi. She's a female, and the females are allowed to marry. And he erred in this, and therefore he didn't want to. And that was the penashtisis nafasi, lest I destroy my offspring by creating a sort of offspring from an illegal relationship, from a prohibited relationship, if I'm to marry a Moabite convert who I'm not allowed to marry. Now, if you go back to verse 1, Pasuk Aleph, where it said, it called this guy Ploni Almoni and didn't identify him. So Rashi there comments, it doesn't identify him because he didn't want to redeem. Because he didn't want to redeem it, he doesn't get his name mentioned. And it seems strange, because did he do something so wrong by not redeeming? He thought maybe he made a mistake in the halacha. He thought that was the halacha. He thought he wasn't allowed to marry her. So what did he do wrong? So Rabbi Frand, in his book, he quotes from Nachlas Yosef that and I looked at Nachlas Yosef. I don't know if Nachlas Yosef actually says it exactly this way, but Rabbi Frand brings it out this way, that it's true. He thought that it was he thought he wasn't allowed to marry her, and that's why he didn't. Okay, but at the end of the day, he didn't, right? And we come up with so many reasons why we can't do things, right? There are so many things that we could potentially do, but we tell ourselves that we can't for this reason or for that reason. Sometimes they're valid reasons, right? But somebody who really wants to do something will overcome those valid reasons. We can call them excuses. We don't have to call them excuses. We all have our reasons why we do things and why we don't do things. But often those things hold us back. Those reasons, those excuses that we make for ourselves. And somebody who gets things done is somebody who looks past that. Okay, it makes me uncomfortable. Okay, push through it, right? I think it might might not be permitted, so I can't do it. Okay, so ask the rabbi if it's permitted or not, and then maybe it is, and you won't miss out on this. And here he missed out because he made a mistake in the halacha. It's good to be stringent when we're not sure, but ask, find out. He had Boaz there. It could be another way to look at it is that he made a mistake because he didn't accept the ruling. He knew that they had ruled that it's okay, but he said, I'm above that. But if the court here ruled that it's okay, then he should accept it. So in the end, he doesn't merit to have his name written in this book, in this holy book, because he didn't step up when he had the opportunity to to step up. And we have so many opportunities, different situations where we can step up, and we have to try to not let too many reasons get in the way of fulfilling our potential.
Two questions,
It's-
Rabbi.
Yeah.
One is, this presumes that Ruth, in fact, did have a conversion at the time she was married to, in Moab. Otherwise, she would not have inherited through the ketubah. Or would she have? That's a question when she actually converted.
Right.
And as to go the second, the other woman, the other wife, who comes then the question, did she convert later on, or did she convert earlier, because she comes into play? And my second question is the word goel here used as a specialized form of buying, of liknos? Because it doesn't seem like there's any money owed or on the property that needs to be redeemed from. So that's my two questions.
Okay, so the first point, maybe it presumes that she had already converted. I don't know necessarily. A ksuba is a monetary contract, so there could have been a contract whether she had converted or not, that she would receive land in the event of her husband's death. In terms of the second point of the word goel, so in Parshas Bahar 2 weeks ago, we encounter over and over again geula tiyeh. There's an opportunity for redemption, and that it seems to be a term used for saving a field to be within the shevet, or within the tribe, or within the family, and that's how we're presenting it here. That the Redeemer is going to keep the land within the family. That's the role here. So one more thing, which is an interesting observation. If we take this approach that when he said, "Lest I destroy my offspring," he meant, because if she's forbidden for me to marry, then I'm going to be producing offspring that from a illegitimate relationship. So, but why wasn't he concerned about the marriage itself? Like, why is he only concerned about the children? Why doesn't he say, "Lest I do something forbidden and marry her"? Right? Why is he only worried about his offspring? Why isn't he worried about his own actions? That I can't marry her because it might be forbidden. That's what he should say. So this is a question that the Brisker Rav asked, Rav Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, and he suggested the following: that really he had accepted the ruling of the Beis Din, that it was permitted. The issue was that he understood that this was the Beis Din's, the court's interpretation of the verse, and they interpreted that when it says "Lo yavo Amoni Moavi b'kal Hashem," that Amoni and a Moavi can't marry, they interpreted, but a Moavite is permitted, and that was their interpretation, and therefore it was permitted. His concern was that there might be in a future generation another Beis Din, another court that would come along and say, then override the ruling and the interpretation of this court, and so his actions would be absolutely permitted. But if another court would come along and overrule it, so then it would turn out that his offspring were the offspring of a forbidden relationship, and that was his concern. He was wrong though, because it was not just the interpretation of this court. It was in fact halacha l'Moshe miSinai. This was a tradition dating back to Sinai, that this is how to interpret this halacha, and the verse provides support for it. But the idea that it's to be interpreted this way was actually a tradition from Sinai. It was not something that could be refuted by a future Beis Din, a future court. Okay, verse 7. So he has said, Tov has said he doesn't want to do it, and then the verse tells us, Vizos lifanim b'Yisrael al hagula v'al atmura l'kayem kol davar. So the way that they would affect transactions and exchanges to establish it was shalaf ishna alo. A man would remove his shoe, v'nasang areo, he would give it to his friend. V'zos hatuda b'Yisrael. This was the kind of the testimony. This was a way of creating a transaction. It sounds almost like chalitza, and some may relate it to chalitza, but on a most simple level, this is just a transaction. If you sold your chametz this year, you may have made a kinyan with the rabbi, kind of raised something up as to transfer the rights to the rabbi to sell on your behalf. So that's actually a similar thing to what's going on here. This is a transferal of rights from the first Goel to Boaz, to give Boaz now the right to redeem the field in his stead. So that's what he says. That's what they used to do. Vayomer Goel Boaz, Pnei Lach. So the Goel said to Boaz, he said, you should acquire the rights. Vayishlof na'alo, and he removed his shoe. It's actually not so clear who removed whose shoe gets removed, but that's debated already, I think, in the Gemara. Verse 9, Vayomer Boaz lazikenim, and Boaz said to the elders, V'chol ha'am edim, V'chol ha'am, and to the nation, Edim atem hayom, you are witnesses today, Ki kanisi es kol asher le'Elimelech, and I have acquired all that belonged to Elimelech, Ve'es, or at least all that was for sale, Ve'es kol asher le'Kilyon u'Machlon miyad Naomi, and all that belonged to Kilyon and Machlon, I have acquired it from Naomi, meaning whatever Naomi possessed from them, I've acquired, and he acquired that through traditional means of acquisition, with of acquiring a field with money or with a document or through an act of chazakah, of demonstrating that it's his. Now. And then he says in the next verse, and also Rus, the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, I have acquired, to establish the name of the departed upon the land. And his name should not be cut off from amongst his brethren, and from the gates of his place. You are witnesses today. So he says, I've also acquired Rus, the Moabite, the wife of Machlon. So we've been going back and forth. Whose wife? It never says whose wife she was. Was she Machlon or Kilyon's? So here it says that she was the wife of Machlon. I believe, though, some commentaries say that actually originally she was the wife of Kilyon. Arpa was the older sister, Rus was the younger sister, Machlon was the older brother, Kilyon was the younger brother, and the older married the older, and the younger married the younger. But after, but Rus's husband died first. Her husband Kilyon died first, and then she married Machlon as Yibum, and so she ended up being the wife of Machlon too. And that's why he calls her the wife of Machlon. So in any event, so this is the second step. There's he's going to, in addition to acquiring the fields of Rus, he's going to also marry Rus. Sorry, in addition to acquiring the fields of Naomi, he's also going to marry Rus, and he calls her Eshes Machlon, the wife of Machlon, because in a certain way she is still the wife of Machlon, because that's again bring us back to the concept of Yibum. Yibum, the idea is to perpetuate the legacy of the departed, or the soul of the departed, and the way the Malbim actually looks at it in his commentary on Chumash is that at least for the first time that the Yavam and the Yavama, the man and the woman doing Yibum, the first time they come together, we still view her as the wife of her first husband, and therefore the offspring from that first time that they have relations would still be the offspring of the first husband, so to speak, and therefore it calls her still the Eshes Machlon. She's still the wife of Machlon, in so far as they're going to do an act similar to Yibum here. And that this could perpetuate Machlon's legacy, if they produce offspring from that first relationship, and that first time that they're intimate, and okay, and the people respond. Verse Yud Aleph, Vayomru kol ha'am asher b'shar. So all the people that were there by the gate, Vazikanim, and the others, Edim, will be witnesses. And they give him a blessing. They say the woman that's coming to your house should be like Rachel and Leah, right? Ruth has a lot in common with Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah, who married Yaakov, they also didn't come from the best background. They were from the house of Lavan, and yet they became these great matriarchs of Israel. And they blessed him that Ruth, his wife, who also comes from questionable origins, not necessarily the greatest upbringing, but she should also be one to build a house in Israel, a special house. Asher banu shteim es beis Yisrael, right? Those two built the house of Israel. All of Israel comes from them, or their maidservants, but really from them. And then he gives him a blessing. Then they also bless Boaz, and they say that you should do great things in Ephrasa, in Ephrat, where they were from. Ukrashem bebeis Lechem, and your name should be known around this place, Beis Lechem. Actually, the Malbim says Ephras was like the family name, and so you should bring honor to your family, and your name should be known in terms and be praised in your place, Beis Lechem. And then one more blessing they give, verse 12, Vihi Beischa Beis Peretz, and your house should be like the house of Peretz, Asher Yalda Tamar Yehuda, that Tamar gave birth from Yehuda to Peretz. Minazer Asher Yiteng Hashem Mula Ucha Minganai Razos. That should be like the offspring that you have from this girl should be like Peretz. So just to go back, Peretz is Boaz's ancestor, and Peretz was the product. They're actually twins born to Yehuda and Tamar. So there was also a type of Yibum. Yehuda had two sons, Er and Onan. They both were married to Tamar one after the other. They both died, and Tamar ends up having relations with Yehuda and giving birth to Peretz and Zerach, and Peretz is the ancestor of Boaz, and there was also like a Yibum type of situation where it was a perpetuation of the departed. That's Peretz was either Er or Onan, his a perpetuation of his soul, and so they're blessing him that it should be a similar thing here. This is what the Malbim says, that your house should be like the house of Peretz, meaning that you should also be successful in perpetuating, in accomplishing Yibum, and perpetuating the name of the departed and the soul of the departed, and that's what happens. Verse 13, Vayikach Boaz es Rus, and Boaz took Rus as with Kiddushin, Vati lo leisha, and he married her. He had nisuin, the different steps of a marriage. Vayavo elah, he had relations with her. Vayiting Hashem la herayon, and Hashem gave her herayon. She became pregnant. Vateled bain, and she gave birth to a son. So you see already the Malbim says this isn't classic Yibum, because in a classic Yibum, there's no Kiddushin. But here, there was Kiddushin, because this was not your classic Yibum. This was for 10 years and not had a child. But now, from the first time that she has relations, I'm still on, right? Yeah, I think so. I'm unstable, but I'm still on. Said my connection is unstable, but I'm stable. So even though she had been married for 10 years and had not had a child, but now from the first union with Boaz, they produce a child, a tremendous hashgacha. tremendous intervention from God, and this was again a perpetuation of the name, as we see in the next verses. Vatomar na'anashim al Naomi, and the women said to Naomi, Baruch Hashem asher lo ishbis lach goel hayom. It praises Hashem that he didn't hold back a goel. You found a goel for your family and for your daughter-in-law, and for your son, really, because this is perpetuating Naomi's son's name. The Karei Shmo B'Yisrael, and his name will be recognized within Israel. That this is your son in a certain sense, because this is the perpetuation of her son, Machon, and the one who's born is kind of a replacement of the soul of the one who passed, and they continue and they say V'haya alach l'meishiv nefesh. So he's a return of the soul. That's how you can interpret it based on this idea that it's a yibum. This is the returning of that soul that died, and uchakela sevasech. This will also be able to provide for you in your old age. Ki chalasech asher hevasech yeladatu. Your daughter-in-law who you love, birthtim asher hitova lach mishiva banim. She's better to you than 7 sons. I'm sure there's lots of interpretation there. I didn't actually get into that. One very fascinating thing to point out. So Elimelech, moves. He goes to Moab. He dies. Fine. Then Machon and Kilion marry Rus and Arpa, and they die too. So what are people saying? People are saying if you marry Rus and Arpa, then you die. The Goel is offered the opportunity to marry Rus. He doesn't want to. So another interpretation, this is in the Midrash, is that he didn't want to because he said, when you marry Rus, you die. Right? Obviously, it's not a good thing. You're not supposed to marry her. Now Boaz marries Rus. Now Chazal teach us, our sages teach us that Boaz died that night after he united with Rus and she conceived. Boaz died, and the different sources to try to pinpoint where Chazal saw that. Some say, I think from this verse 14, it says, God didn't hold back a goel today, like it was like one day and that's it. And the Mishpat Zav points out that if we understand this way, that Boaz died following this union, so one perspective would be, well, he died because he wasn't supposed to marry her, right? This was he did something wrong. The brother was right, the uncle Tov was right, and Boaz was wrong, and that's why he died. But in fact, the correct perspective is no. Boaz was actually not a young person at this time, and pinpointing his exact age, might have been very old, but however, he was not young, and Hashem had kept him alive to this point to fulfill his purpose, which is to bring a child to Rus, and to eventually produce King David, David HaMelech, and eventually Moshiach. And once he fulfilled his purpose, so then he could leave the world. So it's not that sometimes, again, we're not to judge, but we never know why things happen. One person looking at this would have said Boaz died because he was being punished because he did something wrong. The correct perspective, though, is Boaz died because he had finally fulfilled his purpose, or the last part of his purpose, and it was time for him to depart, to leave the world. Okay, so then the Megillah concludes, Vatikach Naomi es hayela vatishiseyu. So Naomi took the boy, this is her grandson, sort of. It's and in a certain way it's her son, as we say. It's a perpetuation of her own child, and vatishiseyu b'cheka, she placed him in her bosom. Vatilo lo menes, and she's the one that took care of him. She nursed him. I mean, she was his nurse. She took care of him. Vatikrena lo hashchenos shem lemar, and the neighbors said, Yuad ben Naomi. Naomi has had a son, because again, this is in a certain way her own son. It's Naomi's own son because it's a perpetuation of her son. Again, it's being born to Ruth and Boaz, but it's like her son. Vatikrena shmo Oved, and she called the child Oved, who Avi Yishai Avi David, and he was the father of Yishai, who was the father of David, of King David, and so he was somebody who would be Oved Hashem, he would serve Hashem. And then the Megillah concludes by showing us how this all leads to the birth of David. The Elah told us Peretz. These are the offspring of Peretz, going all the way back. It brings us back up to Peretz, the son of Yehuda and Tamar. And it says, this is the offspring of Peretz. Peretz Holidas Chetzron. Peretz gave birth to Chetzron. The Chetzron Holidas Ram. Chetzron gave birth to Ram. The Ram Holidas Aminadav. And Ram begot Aminadav. Aminadav Holidas Nachshon. Aminadav begot Nachshon. The Nachshon Holid Es Sama. Right, this is the famous Nachshon ben Aminadav. So Nachshon begot Sama. Besamon Holidas Boaz. He begot Boaz. Boaz Holidas Oved. Boaz begot Oved. Oved Holidas Yishai. The Yishai Holid Es David. And Oved produced Yishai, and Yishai produced David. So we have here the origins of King David, and it seems clear that at least one of the sort of based on the climax or the conclusion of the Megillah, that part of the purpose here is really to show us where David HaMelech came from, and everything that we saw, everything that we learned, seems to be important ingredients in the formation of King David, of the king of Israel, and that not just the king, but the dynasty, the Davidic dynasty, and ultimately of the Mashiach. This is where a Jewish king is to come from, and it's very fascinating, and that's really also where the connection is to Shavuos. I know we're over time, but so if anybody needs to go, please don't. Please do, but we'll just mention a few words about Shavuos and maybe gain perspective on the Megillah. You know, it's good to go back over it and try to figure out what for ourselves what are the main takeaways from the Megillah. But we know the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch brings down that we read the Megillah of Ruth on Shavuos, and there's a number of reasons that we find, some as early as in Midrash, some later reasons given. So the Ramah says it he quotes from the Reb David Abu Draham, and Abu Draham says that first of all, it happens at the time of the harvest, or part of the story. So that's the time of year. So that's one reason. Okay, fine. Additionally, though, the Shavuos is the time we accept the Torah in a certain, and it's the time where we as an entire nation went through a conversion. And Ruth goes through her own conversion, and really stands as a paradigm of someone who was ready to give up everything to be part of Am Yisrael, to be part of the Jewish nation. And really, whatever our background is on Shavuos, that's something that we have to ourselves, we go through that process every year where we re-accept the Torah, and we are really accepting to recommit ourselves to all the precepts of the Torah, all the teachings of the Torah, and just as Ruth was ready to completely change her life, so on Shavuos we remind ourselves that we too need to when we accept the Torah, we too have to be ready to change our lives to be able to follow in the ways of the Torah. Those, I think, are the most simple reasons. Another idea the commentaries bring down is that David HaMelech, tradition teaches us that he was, let me just say this right, that he died on Shavuos, and we assume that because God makes it that tzaddikim are born and die on the same day, that if he died on Shavuos, he must have been born on Shavuos too. So it's all about leading up to the birth of David HaMelech, and following that train of assumption, then it would seem to be the day, Shavuos would be the day that David HaMelech not only died, but also was born. And so it's relevant to read about his origins on Shavuos. But Chazal also tell us two more things in different places. The sages teach us in the Midrash Yakut Shimoni that Rus is read on Shavuos to teach us that the Torah is given or received through suffering. Meaning, as we see in the story of Rus, it wasn't easy, right? It's a hard story, but the ending is great, right? There's famine, there's people dying, there's poverty, and but in the end, through all that, through the tears and through the pain and through the struggle, is a David HaMelech is born, and a Mashiach is born, and it seems with Torah also. First of all, Torah is acquired through suffering. A person has to be ready to put themselves through a lot to really gain in Torah. But more than that, the commentary Nachlas Yosef says that as a people, we've suffered greatly over the years, and he says, based on different teachings of the sages, it kind of all starts from Har Sinai. The one of the reasons that it's called Har Sinai, the sages teach us, the Gemara says, is because from there came sinah, came hate to the Jewish people. That ultimately the nations hate us because we have the Torah, and so on Shavuos, the day we celebrate getting the Torah, a person might start to think, well, we've been through so much, is it really worth it, to suffer so much just to have the Torah? And but we see from Rus what comes from difficult challenges, and what can be produced. And yes, we've suffered over the generations, but it's all for a purpose, and the results can be great. And finally, there's another midrash which says as follows, and this is maybe the easiest to relate to, or at least an easier concept to relate to. It says, this is in the midrash Lekach Tov. Why do we read the Megillah on Chag HaShavuos? It says, because the Megillah is kula chesed. The Megillah of Rus is full of chesed, of kindness, of acts of kindness. The Torah kula chesed, and the Torah is all chesed, as it says, b'toras chesed al leshona. There's a Torah of chesed on her lips, on her tongue, and the Torah was given on Chag HaShavuos. So the Torah is all about chesed, and this Megillah Rus is all about chesed, and on a deeper level. So it's very fascinating because it's interesting. We're bringing out the origins of King David. What are the origins? He comes from a Moabite, right? Like, maybe it's better to just sweep that under the rug. Like, why are we publicizing this? Why are we writing a Megillah and reading it in public to bring out something that maybe we will possibly be embarrassed about? And the answer is that no, because we see what the origins of a David HaMelech have to be. We see that all the chesed, all the kindness that Rus does, all the kindness that Boaz does, and that's what's important, is what it comes down to. And yeah, she's from Moab, right? But we were obviously missing something. We needed a Rus to come from Moab. The way the Nachlas Yosef says it is, we needed a vitamin boost, right? There was something lacking, and that's really how the Megillah starts, where Elimelech doesn't want to do chesed, he doesn't want to do kindness, so he runs away. And it was the time where there was a lack of kindness amongst the Jewish people, and in order to produce the king of Israel, the ultimate dynasty of the kings of Israel and the Mashiach, we needed a boost from the outside. you know, even if it came from the outside, but we needed that boost of vitamin, of the chesed vitamin. And and that's what we're trying to express with this Megillah, is the importance of chesed. Chesed is at the root of so much that is a part of the Torah. So yes, we read about the origins of David, and we show, yes, he comes from Moab, but he comes from a great tzaddikus from Moab, and that's what we want to bring out. So that's the central theme of Megillas Rus, is the chesed that each person here is doing for each other, and on the day that we re-accept the Torah, on the day the Torah is given. So it's a reminder of the centrality of chesed, of doing for others, which is at the very roots of the Torah. Many sources that indicate that, but we're just going to keep it short for now. Okay, so wishing everybody a tremendous Chag next week, and I hope that when we learn Rus, we'll find more meaning in it.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Very
Rabbi.
informative.